Wait, before you record, look at the link. Look at the link before
I'll check it at the end. After I stop the recording, I'll check it at the end. It saves, don't worry. So, because I got to make sure we get through this stuff. I will check it at the end, and if I forget, remind me. So yes, like I said, a little bit of fun. I was inspired, and I mean, it's not like I'm some expert, but I decided to hide some Bernies in the slides, so you may or may not find them. There's a couple in there. I think there's like 8. But so that being said, we're talking about the middle class growing and rising, and we are talking about reform. And we're talking about this all in the context of the Gilded Age. So enough with the spelling jokes. It's all good. Let's focus up. We have a lot to talk about. So I want to make sure we get through it all because we're going to cram 2 lessons together. So as I said, there were 2 objectives, economic opportunity and how it increased. And then we're talking about reform movements during the Gilded Age. Again, some of these movements you've already heard about. Some of them you haven't. Some of them you have. But we're going to talk about them in the context of the Gilded Age. Also, there's a crazy axe-wielding lady. So corporations had a need for managers and clerical workers, male and female, specifically clerical workers. That male and female is specific to clerical workers. This, along with increased access to educational institutions, fostered, right, the growth of a middle class. So you get a middle class rising out of here. And the reason it happens is because you need managers and need clerical workers. And clerical workers, what's a clerical worker? There's several, there's a bunch of types. It's a super general term. But what is a clerical worker? What do we got? Somebody put in the chat. What's an example of a job that is a clerical job? And if you don't know, if you're like, I've never heard of clerical before, it's a weird thing, then tell me. No, that's clergy. Clerical. What's a clerical? And if you don't know, put don't know. No. HEB has clerical workers, but working at an HEB, like in the floor, is not clerical. I wouldn't say cashier. Cashier is like retail. Not sure, don't know. It's okay if you don't know, but I just want to see you guys tell me, right? Tell me. I don't know. I've never heard that term before. It's a weird term. It's an older term too. It's not something you hear a lot now because the type of job that we're talking about kind of have their own names. Not a manager. So a clerical worker, think secretary, think accountant, think paperwork. So if you sit at a desk and you work in an office, like the people that worked in the show, The Office, the people that worked at the office, a bunch of those people were probably clerical workers. You're kind of sitting there doing paperwork. You're doing weird stuff like that. That's funny. So that's what a clerical worker is. It's not meant to be like really flashy work, but the point is, what type of work is it not? Like if you're a clerical worker, what work don't you have to do now in order to make decent money? So like working in an office, working in cubicles, exactly. That's clerical work. Now this is pre-cubicle, but you get what I'm saying. And the rise of clerical jobs meant what jobs didn't you have to take anymore? What don't you have to work as if you're going to be a secretary, you're going to work on a typewriter, you don't have to work in the factory, right? You don't have to sit there building things all day. You don't have to sit there getting your hands dirty. You get to keep your hands clean. This is where the term white collar comes from. You ever heard white collar, blue collar? I'm in a cubicle at school. You are in a cubicle at school, but that's why I'm saying this is pre-cubicle. So we'll go another 45 seconds on this key point to make sure you have it down. I want to be a secretary. It is still a very viable job. Although I would say you can aim higher. I think you should aim higher. But that being said, and also I will say like the role of the secretary is really impactful for that's a solid Bernie one. That's a really good one. I hadn't seen that one. I'd seen a few. I've seen a bunch of history ones. That one's really good. That one's really well done too. I'll show you guys in a bit. About 15 seconds. If you need this, grab a screenshot and we're going to move on. We're going to move into what a corporate structure kind of looks like to an extent. This isn't economics class, and we're going to get into where managers fit in. So corporate structure is 3 sections, right? There is executives, people that run the company, Carnegie. Managers, people who run the day-to-day labor, people who are white-collar workers. That's where the term comes from because they don't get their hands dirty. They don't get their collars dirty. They run the factory. And then you have laborers, right, which are the people who did the work in the factory. With managers comes clerical work, accountants, secretaries, etc. Found Bernie, yeah. many women especially take on these clerical jobs like secretaries. And a big part of why is because of the typewriter. Women were also hired as school teachers a lot during this era. So roles as school teachers, roles as secretaries, things like the typewriter, things like clerical jobs and managerial jobs are what lead to a whole class of people, a group of people who have a better paying job than the laborer, but not quite as high a paying job as the industry, the captain of industry, right? As high a job as the Carnegies of the world. So they're not wealthy, but they're making better money than the laborers, and they're working for less time. So a laborer, we're going to get into how long laborers work, but typically 12, 14-hour day. Managers and clerical workers do not work that long. It's closer to the 8-hour day that we have now. So I'll give you about 2 minutes. It's a lot of info on here. What do you need from this slide? Again, you need to know the 3 levels of the structure. You need to know what clerical workers do. Mention the typewriter. It's really important because it allows for so many. It's a whole new class of job when that becomes a thing. Whole new class. So I would mention it. About a minute and a half left. I promise the Bernies are going to get harder to find. At least I think they are. This could be wrong. About a minute. So remember, the opportunities are there. Opportunities are there. People's interests rise. Everything gets better. Yeah, I'm not that good at Photoshop, guys. I can't manage that. Like it wouldn't look as good. It would have been good if I had found one of those with him in there. If I was good at Photoshop, I totally would have hit him in some of the pictures, but he's just kind of put there. He's just in the background. I do hide him behind some of them though. About 20 seconds. Yeah, that would have been really awesome. I agree 100%. My skills are lacking in this department, though. All right, we're going to go ahead and move forward from the Last Supper. I saw one of him in the World War II picture. I might actually borrow it, where it's Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt, and then they put Bernie in there. That one was also really good. So let's move forward. Let's talk about money and leisure. So all these people, all these folks are working in a place that's above the lower class, right? So, but they're below the wealthy class. So their wages are higher than laborers. They don't live in poverty. They have extra money. So they are able to, they have extra money and they have extra time, right? Because they're working less hours. So what you get with this is this growth of a consumer culture, this growth of buying things, this growth of needing something to do with your time, right? Because now instead of working from, let's just say, I don't know, 7 a.m. to 10 at night, you'll work at 7 a.m., but you get out at 4 o'clock. What are you going to do with the rest of your day? These meaning the middle class. Yes, so these are where the middle class comes from. So what are you going to do with your day? Well, you need something to do. Coney Island, New York amusement park, something you guys may or may not be familiar with. At the time, it was cutting edge technology. They had roller coasters, they had electronic lights. It was a big hurrah. It's a big deal. And amusement parks like that are starting to pop up everywhere. It's where the amusement park comes from. Back in the day, having electronics, having a roller coaster, having a few little attractions was enough to keep you in business. You didn't need to be Disneyland. Now you got to be Disney. But back in the day, it was a thing. It was something to do with your time, something to do with your money. P.T. Barnum Circus. You got to mention the P.T. Barnum Circus, P.T. Barnum specifically. That was a big deal too, big attraction. A lot of people show up to that. Baseball and American football also become, what would be the term? Not quite industries. It's not like today where it's $1 million industries, but they become profitable for some people. It becomes a thing people need to spend time doing because they have money and time to do it. So, hey, let's go watch a baseball game, or let's go to Coney Island and get on the roller coaster and have fun. Let's go look at the circus, right? It's not quite movie theaters and concerts, but can you see how it's getting to that, right? We're getting to where in 2020, or maybe not 2020 because of COVID, but like in 2019, it's like, hey, let's go to the movie theater. Let's go, hey, you know what, this December, we're getting to go watch the Cowboys game. Like it's starting to become a thing. But prior to that, when it's only you're dirt poor or you're super wealthy, this isn't a business, right? You can't make a circus and have only the Andrew Carnegies of the world show up. You'll never survive. But with a middle class comes, hey, P.T. Barnum Circus. Hey, Coney Island Amusement Park. Hey, baseball games, right? It starts becoming a thing. And no one wants to, well, yeah, because they lose all the time. But you get my point, right? It's the birth of all this stuff. And it happens at the tail end of the Gilded Age. Going public, right? Back in our day, there was movie theaters. I saw one of the okay, grandma, let's go to bed meme. And it was like, back in my day, we used to, go watch a movie on a giant screen surrounded by people we knew. And I was like, okay, grandma, go to bed. I miss movie theaters, guys. It's hurting. It's hurting right here. Right here. Really is. Wish they were still around. Wish it was still okay to go to one without sitting in a petri dish. I'll give you about a minute and a half. A minute and a half. You need to know that the middle class is rising, which that's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Point out leisure. You need the term leisure. Point out growth of consumer culture. And then give examples of leisure and consumer culture. Leisure activities meaning, again, amusement parks, circus. Later would be like movie theaters. And then consumer culture would just be like, hey, spending money on the game, like going to a restaurant, having extra money to do things like that you probably wouldn't have had before. Not probably, that you didn't have before. Now there is a middle class rising that can do those things. They can afford to do it. They have the time to do it. Professional sports is a big one. That's one that'll happen. Give you about a minute and a half. And if there's any questions, please let me know. About to move on to key point 2. We're going to talk about philanthropy. Philanthropic people. "40 seconds. And I know that the Coney Island, these are 2 photographs. I know this is actual Coney Island, like right at the end of the Gilded Age with all the lights and stuff. I believe this is the New York Gothams, I think is the name of the team. This was like pre-Yankees, but this is a Gilded Age baseball team. I didn't just find I believe, I could be wrong, but this is what I found. This is a painting of P.T. Barnum. I couldn't find they have pictures of the cart, but I couldn't find one in time because you could have put him behind. Yeah, I do need to learn Photoshop. It would have been great, but I think you're right. I think if I tried to learn it, I'm going to delete something. I don't have the finesse to Photoshop, guys. It's not in my wheelhouse. It's literally like the opposite of the stuff I'm good at. Okay, so let's move forward, but I do think it would be funny. Let's go into key point 2, right? So some business leaders argued that the wealthy had a moral obligation, right? They had a God-given purpose to help the less fortunate and improve society, as articulated in an idea that you've already heard about known as the gospel of wealth, something that Carnegie came up with, right? The idea being that, hey, we have what would be the term? Can't believe I forgot how to speak for a second. Good to know. Duty, there you go, right? You have a sense of duty, moral obligation, sense of duty, thanks, Max, to help society with all your money. Like you're super wealthy, but you should be doing something positive with that money as well, not just spending it on stuff. Good to know. Some of you guys are saying you're good at Photoshop, good at help with the Bernie stuff. Good to know. I might need your help later. I will say later on, we are going to do a propaganda, not contest, but project, kind of like how we did the videos. And you can do it however you want. Like you can make a video, you could do a Photoshop or something, but it's going to be like propaganda. And we're going to do it during the Red Scare. So we're going to do it in Unit 8. It's going to be fun. Period 8. Keep saying unit. 30 seconds. That'll be fun. The propaganda contest project thing. You come up with better names for stuff.
Sir, you can't have a contest in today's society because you're going to ruin the self-esteem of children.
Well, you could say that, but I mean, that's the fun of it, isn't it? Challenge y'all to make the best propaganda. Red Scare. It's like I was gonna make a propaganda wall, but we never got to it because COVID. But all I have is that one. If you guys see my classroom, I have the one Scott's paper towel ad from the 50s that a buddy of mine photoshopped for me, where they took out the word washroom and replaced it with classroom. It's really good. I don't care about them. Nah, you guys, it's not. It would be friendly competition. I'll give everybody a participation grade, right? Participation trophy. So. The self-esteem sounds so philanthropic actions. I don't even know what I'm saying. Carnegie's goal is to reduce the distance between the rich and the poor. That's his overall goal with this gospel of wealth, with this idea of philanthropy. But he doesn't want to just give people money. That's not going to help anybody. What's the old saying? You teach a man to fish, you feed him for a day, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, you teach him to fish, you feed him forever. He didn't want to just give them money. He wanted to fix society. So that's why he invested in libraries, free libraries, universities, concert halls, things of that nature in order to help fix society and thus bridge the gap between the wealth and the have and the have-nots, right? That was his goal. He wasn't alone. Phoebe Anderson Hearst you need all of them. Phoebe A. Hearst did a lot of work giving away her money towards education specifically. She's one of the first people who pioneered this idea that, hey, the wealthy and the poor should be educated at the same level. And believe it or not, I don't see why you wouldn't believe it when we were talking about social Darwinism yesterday. People didn't, that was revolutionary at the time, right? Hey, you're poor, you get a poor education. Like that was the way people thought back then. So she's one of the first to say, no, everybody should get the same level of education. Like people can do it. Doesn't matter how much money you have. And so she's one of the first to do that. She's a really awesome person. Really awesome message. So a lot of her money, and she had a vast wealth as well, went into doing just that, to fixing education, making the poor be educated the same way as the wealthy. And in some ways, just as a whole, the gospel of wealth concept and idea did lead to an increase in the middle class because these educational places, these concert halls, these libraries were being used by those people in order to raise up to that middle class level, right? You can't be a manager if you can't read. So things like that do help in a sense. And they're not perfect. It's not a perfect system. It is very much a system of some people believe in it, some people just say they do. But it did in general terms, and in some ways, some smaller ways, some bigger ways, help increase the growth of the middle class. So I'll give you about 90 seconds. There's not a lot here, right? You already know about the gospel of wealth. You already defined it before. So it's just about making sure you mention Hearst, making sure you mention the overall message and how it helped the middle class rise. So about a minute left. Need more time than that, let me know. But we're going to move into key point 3 shortly after that. Talk about some reforms. About 30 seconds. If you need more time, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to move on into key point 3. All right, let's go to move forward. So key point 3, number of artists, critics, a little more time. Oh, sorry, didn't see that. All right, we'll go another 30 seconds. Then we'll move into key point 3. Now we're going to start talking, we're going to change a little bit. We talked about the middle class. See what I mean? Short lesson. We're going to talk about social reform next. Again, a lot of these reform movements you've heard of. A couple of the early ones you haven't, at least not here. So those early ones, especially, make sure you're focusing on them. Some of them I'm just going to name, and you should already know what they mean to an extent. All right, moving forward now. Okay, so artists, critics, including agrarians, utopians, and socialists, advocates of the social gospel as well, sorry, left them out, champion alternative visions for the economy and US society. So there's these groups and they want to change society, they want to change the economy. They want to reform things like labor especially. So we're gonna get into those groups and what they intend to do in about 90 seconds. So I'll leave you a little bit of time for the key points. I'm going to start with utopia. Who knows what utopia is? Because utopians just believe in a utopia that they want to achieve. And if you don't know, just put don't know. Perfect society, that's a utopia, right? And there's all these, perfect world, perfect society. The idea is that everything is right. Everybody's got food. Everybody's got everything they could ever want, right? Something people of the U.S. believe, but will never happen. I tend to agree that utopia is not a real thing. It's almost as fictitious as like unicorns. Like it's not real. I'm sorry if I broke your hearts and told you unicorns aren't real. Maybe one day you'll prove me wrong. But utopia is not, it's something people strive for. But during the Gilded Age, it's not that it's a new thing, but like the term is new. So there's an actual like movement that like, hey, we can achieve this utopia. Some people in the Soviet Union wanted to achieve utopia. There's all sorts of groups all over the world that are trying to achieve it. Yeah, it's their own version of it. Yeah, it's a general term. It's really general. It's really broad. But overall, the idea is that everything's perfect. Nobody needs anything. Heart is shattered. I'm okay. Sorry I shattered your heart about unicorns. But had to happen. Had to happen at some point, I guess. I don't know. I feel kind of bad about that one now. Okay, so let's move forward. All right. Social reform groups and movements. We got to remember the first thing that's happening during this era, and it's something I've said like a million times, right? Cottage industry is changing towards the factory mass production system. What's cottage industry? Who remembers that? And if you don't remember, put don't remember, but hopefully we should remember that one quickly. What's a cottage industry? And if we don't know, someone tell me they don't know, but what is cottage industry? What does that mean? What makes it cottage? What do they do? Don't know, okay. Industry regarding artisan work. So in what sense? Like what makes it cottage? It's being done at home, right? That's what cottage industry is. You're working from home. Homemade pots, clothes, everything was made back at home, right? And artisans is a really good term because it's people that knew how to make it, right? If I were to tell Alex, hey, go make a cell phone at your house right now, I don't know if you'd be able to do it. If you would, that'd be really impressive. But I would be like, how'd you get all of the, how'd you get all the cobalt and all those things you needed? But like, that's not a thing that happens anymore. Now we make stuff in factories, right? It's all mass produced. But can I just give you my phone? See, that's not the same thing. But back then, you had to know how to make the thing, like the dress or the boots or the pot, and then you would sell it in smaller markets, right? But the whole, what they refer to as like the industrialized economy or like industrialization, that's industrialization. It's going from making stuff at home to making it in a factory, making it on a bigger scale. No questions? Got it. Won't ask any questions about it. Bring back child labor. No, we don't want child labor back. Come on, man. But the reason that so the thing to know about this change, which again, we've already defined the change. You don't need to write that down necessarily unless you forgot it, is that due to laissez-faire capitalism. And what's laissez-faire? We got to remember laissez-faire. Not even from this class. No regulation. That's key. So laissez-faire is hands off, right? My hands are off. Laissez-faire. Laissez-faire means no regulation. So because there's no government regulation of the economy in this case, of the capitalist economy, these businesses are able to grow as quickly as they need to without having to worry about things like rules or laws. So why is it that you can build a factory with all these machines so quickly over the course of a couple of years? Because it doesn't matter if little Timmy loses his arm in the machine, because there's no government rules telling you what you have to do, right? Telling you that, hey, kids can't work, or hey, you should probably pay that kid if he loses an arm in the machine, not fire him and replace him with someone with 2 arms, right? There's no rules. So because of that lack of rules, businesses are able to worry about growing and making money and nothing else. So it's why it's able to happen so quickly. Otherwise, it would take longer for things to grow organically. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen that, what's that business show, Shark Tank? Where like they're saying like, oh, you need to just grow slower. You're growing too fast, things like that, right? But the businesses are able to grow super quickly and worry about nothing but profit and growth because there's no rules in place that they have to follow. Businesses did well. They increased in size, profits, factory wages were barely enough for laborers to survive. Something to note. 14-hour days, dangerous machines, poor breeding conditions, all of those things you already know about. These conditions lead to a demand for reform. You can only make people work in horrible conditions for so long before they want change. This happens in Russia during the Russian Revolution. This happened in Germany. This happens in a bunch of places that tried to industrialize really quickly. The difference is some places handle it well, like Germany, kind of like the United States for the most part, when you look back on it. And other places didn't, like Russia. Hey, revolution, boom, explosions. We'll get to that. Never, not in this class, but later. You might have covered it last year. But what do you need from the slide? You need to know laissez-faire capitalism lets this growth happen. Without the laissez-faire, you don't get the growth happening so quickly. You don't get all the money happening during this Gilded Age. All the money changing hands doesn't happen that quickly. But you need to know that the horrible conditions will lead to reform. You also won't get this model doesn't last forever. It won't last that long. It's short, relatively speaking, because you need to reform it. People are not going to allow it to keep going. Actually, this photo, now that I think about it, isn't even in the Gilded Age. This is post-Gilded Age, so I kind of regret putting it up here. But it is a good one. But so, I'll give you another minute and a half. I just realized that's at a time. Sometimes I think I've already told you guys to go and then you haven't. So about a minute and a half again, you need to know what laissez-faire is, how it leads to the growth, and just point out that the horrible conditions, and you can go as detailed as you want, because we've talked about bad conditions for a while now, will lead to a demand for reform. Doesn't mean there will be reform, but there will be a demand for it. People will want reform. They will request it, right? You'll get labor unions, all those good things. Next, we're going to talk about some more social reforms. Specifically, we're going to talk about some groups, some names. Utopians. Almost done, guys. "30 seconds. Need more time than that? Let me know. Otherwise, we're going to move forward. Yeah, that, you know, that's not it's not good for business. I don't know if the problem would have been solved with that solution, but hey, you know, and what's funny about the labor unions in the US is they weren't that debatable. They weren't that radical. Like the Knights of Labor meeting that was destroyed by that random attacker, like that guy wasn't in the labor union. Like labor unions weren't, what they were wanting is, for the most part, pretty reasonable. But you know, we'll get into it. But so, social reform. Henry George thought it was foolish that a nation could have so much wealth while so many people were poor. His proposal, and this is Henry George, this guy right here, was something called the single land tax. People needed to pay more taxes based on the land they owned. Pretty simple. You owned a lot of land, you probably had a lot of money, you should pay some taxes on it. Utopian art and literature took hold. The idea of utopia is rampant. Again, utopia is a perfect world. Edward Bellamy, this guy wrote this famous novel, Looking Backward, where a socialist utopia was there formed. Capitalism is gone. Everybody's happy and perfect. I think the year was 2000. Somebody goes from 1870 to 2000, and everything's perfect. The utopia probably looks something like that. You can even see it there in the little novel. It didn't work out that way, obviously. It's well past 2000, and there is no utopia. You know, hint, hint, utopia is probably not a great thing. So you need to know about Henry George. You need to know about the single land tax. Point out, I think we talked about Edward Bellamy already when we were talking about the projects and stuff. Sci-fi becomes a thing. But just in case we didn't write it down, you need to write them down now. So I'll give you about 90 seconds. Then we're gonna move on to socialism.
Sir, that guy looks like Heimler.
This guy does, right?
Yes.
This guy looks exact. I thought that too. This guy looks like Heimler. I agree 100%.
Yo, Heimler, time traveler.
Maybe
No wonder he knows so much history.
he lived it.
He lived in it.
There you go. Yeah, I know. I thought that too. That guy looks a lot like Heimler.
Yo, he just needs
Time
the
traveled back to
spectacles.
the whatchamacallit colonial era. That's how he knows the names of Mayans and Incas.
There you go.
Oh, sir, I'm just saying he just needs the spectacles and it's spot on.
He wears glasses?
I thought so.
Yeah, I think you're right. But
I
yes,
think-
I agree 100%. Heimler.
Sometimes I think. I think he wears them sometimes.
Probably.
He doesn't.
He doesn't? Oh, okay. Oh, you know who you're thinking? You're thinking the other guy. The other history guy wears glasses.
Oh yeah, the skinny one, the
Yeah.
really like.
I was going to say the white one, but they're both white. So
Yeah.
that didn't help.
I mean, he's real skin and bone.
That's true. The one with the hair. Yeah, Green.
John Green?
Green. John Green. Yeah, John Green. Not Hank
They
Green.
have the
Hank Green is
same
singer.
hairline. I'm just saying.
All right, guys. So let's move forward. Hopefully, we got this. I'll give you another couple of seconds if you need to grab a screenshot. Hank Green is better, probably. If you need to grab a screenshot of it, Utopia, Henry George, single tax law, single land tax, not tax law. Bellamy, mentioned Bellamy. Utopia comes a thing. Hank Hill. Yeah, Hank Hill might be the best Hank. Okay, so let's move forward. Social reformers. I didn't even hide Bernie this time because we're talking about socialism. So socialism picked up steam, but never grabbed hold in America. So it took hold, aspects of it took hold in other countries, but it never really quite came to America in the same way. Americans weren't really having it. According to the rules, if you don't know what socialism is, production, the means of production should be owned and regulated by the community. Means of production would mean like the factory. And then everybody equally benefits from that communal owning of things. Now, socialism and utopia, very similar, because in a socialist, for a socialist system to work in theory, everything's got to kind of be working well. Everybody's got to be willing to look out for one another, at least this early version of it, right? This isn't like the same as when you hear socialism now, they're not talking about this. This is when the idea becomes formed. This is the strict definition of it. So just don't mistake current events for what this is. This idea of socialism, what Eugene Debs is going to run his political party and platform on, is the idea that, hey, the people should own the means of production, not a person, the people, right? And when they say the people, they tend to mean the government. And this is where you get iffy, and this is where socialism and communism kind of share the idea that the government runs everything, and then the government dictates how it's different. So don't fall down that rabbit hole yet. We will get there. Trust me. We will talk about communism, capitalism, all that stuff. Right now, socialism is just the idea that, hey, the people should own stuff and the people should all benefit from it. And the failed Socialist Party in the United States was founded by Eugene Debs, who again was trying to practice that. The reason I didn't even hide the Bernie is because Bernie's always accused, and for the most part, he openly like says, right, he's kind of like he's a democratic socialist, which is modern, which again, we're not going to get into. I just went for the joke. Don't mistake modern socialism for what we're talking about here. It's different. Yeah, communism and all that stuff. We will get there and we'll talk about the differences then. Not right now. And then last is the social gospel, which has nothing to do with socialism and actually has everything to do with religion. Christian principles should be applied to not only yourself, but to society as a whole. Many Protestant preachers will crusade for this social justice and helping the urban poor, and they will choose the middle class to do this too. They will target the middle class in order to convince them to help. They're trying to say, hey, middle class people, help the poor. That's where that comes from. So I'll give you about 2 minutes because there's a lot of info on here about social reforms. And then we will move on to the last key point of the day. Yeah, 2 minutes. Social reform, socialism, Eugene Debs. Make sure you mention his name. He's the guy that made that other labor union that didn't go too well. And then the social gospel. Social gospel is important. About minute, 15 seconds left. Minute and change. About 40 seconds, we're going to start talking about women's reform movements, women's suffrage, and then we will close out with the exit ticket today. Pretty easy exit ticket today, I think. Noticing a little bit of a thing we need to practice on. Help us for our unit exam. It'll be wonderful. Everybody will be really happy that we're doing it. "15 seconds. If you need this, make sure you grab a screenshot of it. Otherwise, we're going to move forward. All right, moving on. So, last key point of the day, key point number 4. Many women sought greater equality, with men often joining volunteer with women, that should say women, not men, often joining volunteer organizations, going to college, and promoting social political reform. So going to college, joining volunteer organizations, promoting social political reform in order to get more equality with men. Oh, I know the problem. There should be a comma there. Many women sought greater equality with men, comma, often joining volunteer organizations, going to college, and promoting social political reform. Sorry about that. There should be a comma there, but grammar. I'll give you about 90 seconds. Don't worry about grammar, guys. AP graders don't care about it. About a minute and change. Then we're going to move on. A lot of info on the next couple of slides that you'll probably need. We're going to mention Elizabeth Cady Stanton, checking on our friend Katie Stanton, Susan B. Anthony. We're going to talk about a crazy axe lady. And we're going to talk about temperance. There's a little less than a minute left. In the chat, what's temperance? If you don't remember, put don't remember. But we should remember temperance. Temperance is an easy one to remember. Temperance. What was the temperance movement? Forgot? Okay. It's okay if you forgot, but try to remember. Stop alcohol. Yes, it's the anti-alcohol movement. Awesome. About 20 seconds, and we're going to move on. So make sure you're ready to move on from the last key point. We're going to get into the last slide of information, but there's a lot of it on there, so bear with me. And bear. Okay. So, women's rights advocates. Women took heavy causes for reform during this time. Jane Addams, settlement houses. We talked about Phoebe Hearst with the education movements. And then, of course, you had Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, who created the National American Women's Suffrage Association, or NASA. And women also take up the fight for temperance, right? The fight against alcohol. This is going to be really important in a little bit because it's going to lead to what? What does the temperance movement lead to? What era in time? What time period in the U.S.? What amendment? And then subsequent other amendment after. Do we not remember? We got to know this one. Happened in the 20s. Got your buddy Al Capone involved. Temperance movement leads to this. No, not moonshine. Prohibition. It's going to lead to prohibition. Do we know what prohibition is? I know I haven't talked about it yet, but I feel like we should know prohibition. No? No? Prohibition was a period of time in the United States where alcohol was illegal. Yeah, no alcohol. Alcohol is illegal in the U.S. It's why liquor stores are closed on Sundays in Texas. Prohibition. And because of temperance movements. So we're going to get into all that stuff and how it changed in the U.S. when we get there. But so just know these are the first steps. These are the steps towards prohibition. So Women take up the cause of temperance, fight against alcohol. The Women's Christian Temperance Union, name them, crusaded for total abstinence from alcohol. They had groups like the Anti-Saloon League helping them out during this time period. There were radicals in all of these movements everywhere. In all movements, there's radicals all the time. One worth mentioning is Carrie Nation. She referred to herself, this is a quote that she said, a bulldog running along the feet of Jesus. It's what she called herself. She carried a hatchet literally and would open up barrels of liquor in bars. She'd walk in, smash into them with the axe, let all the alcohol pour onto the ground while she held a Bible. And she's like the only person that probably could have gotten away with doing it. And she did it all over the country. I'm not kidding. That's a real photo. That's actually her. That's actually her hatchet that she would use to break barrels of alcohol open. She did it while carrying a Bible. She did it while loving Jesus. She's a cool lady. And she would get arrested sometimes, and then they would literally just let her out because they're like, hey, don't do it again, right? And she'd be like, I'm going to do it again. They'd be like, all right, bye, Carrie. And then she'd go do it again. Because she kind of looks like your grandma, right? Well, she doesn't look like my grandma, but you get what I'm saying. So give you about 2.5 minutes. There's a lot of info on here, and you pretty much need all of it. Mention things like the Anti-Saloon League. Mention things like the Women's Christian Temperance Movement, because you're going to need it again. Yeah, they would literally, sometimes she would, because she would, she was not chill about these things. She could have taken a chill pill or two. She would literally walk into saloons, break all the alcohol with her hatchet, hold the Bible, scream at all these people that were drinking. And then when they would arrest her, she'd be a nice old lady talking about Jesus, and they'd let her out and she'd do it again. And they didn't arrest her that often, but I know they arrested her a couple of times. So I'll give you about 2.5 minutes for the info. Carrie Nation, mention her just in case as the radical. That's her hatchet. Just, she got confused. She got spirit. I don't even think she's confused. She knows what she's doing, but she definitely probably could have said, oh, but I'm just confused. One minor thing that I will say that it's a pet peeve I have, so I'm just going to do it because now I have the opportunity. I know the difference between your hatchets and your tomahawks. This right here, hatchet, smaller frame, typically big squared axe head. Tomahawks are a little narrower, a little skinnier, longer frame, better for throwing. Also tended to have either spikes or hammer points. Just something that annoys me when I see people hold up hatchets and call them tomahawks, or hold up tomahawks and call them hatchets. Two different things. Respect the hawk, Sorry, went on a rant. That has nothing to do with anything. Don't write any of that down. That's just your history teacher getting ranty and weird. About a minute left on the clock. If you need more time than that, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to move in so you have plenty of time to do the exit ticket, because I do not want to see people not submitting exit tickets. I'm going to make sure you have the time to do it, to get it in, get it done after about 45 seconds. Yes, very much so. Yeah, they have the spike end, the pike end. Some of them have hammered ends, but those were more, if I'm not mistaken, the hammered end comes more from frontiersmen. She didn't tomahawk anybody. She would break barrels with her hatchet. She never hurt people, which is something to point out. But she did get a little hatchet and break liquor barrels up. No, my tomahawk, that's good. Yeah, tomahawks are cool. I fell down a rabbit hole the other day just watching people on YouTube making tomahawks. Not the other day, this was like a month ago, but it's very amusing to me. I was really enjoying it. Because old school tomahawks also, they're held in on the handle by just friction. So it's not like they're not fixed mechanically to the handle. It's friction holding them all together, which is cool. Like that's how the Native Americans made them. They were friction based. So it was all just wooden, stone, bone, metal, but it was all that stuff holding it together. There was no one put a spike in it and held it in place or glued it in place. It was all friction based. It was really cool. All right. So that is time. Does anybody need more time on the slide before we move on? Okay, so we're gonna move on then. Let's talk about exit tickets. Before we get there, before we go to Google Classroom, I'm gonna show you a meme that I showed earlier. What is your question? Someone did this and sent it to me like right before we started, and it was really amusing. Someone put Bernie on this picture. Thought that was awesome. So that being said, let's move in. Where's the exit ticket? Okay. So head into Google Classroom. And the exit ticket should be there. It is pretty straightforward and simple. Let me explain it really quick. Then I'll go to the picture in a second. So here we go. So follow the Google form, same as last time. Make sure your name is on it. So you need to put your name on it. And all you got to do, there's no questions attached. All you got to do is hippo the 2 documents, right? And if you don't remember hippo, I put it here on the description. And here are the documents more zoomed in if you can't read them off of the form. So make sure that you go in and get that done. That is your exit ticket, guys. You have about 10 minutes. That's way more than enough time to hippo a couple of documents. So that is it. Gio, I don't even know what this is that you sent me. I'm so confused right now. But yeah, so that is the exit ticket, guys. That is it. Let me stop the recording.